The first thing I noticed when I stepped through the front door was the silence. No welcoming embrace, no warm words of congratulations, just the faint smell of stale beer and takeout. "James?" I called out, my voice echoing through our once cozy home. I shifted baby Ethan in my arms, his tiny face scrunched up in sleep. After 2 weeks at my mother's house recovering from the birth, I'd expected, well, something more than this. The living room was a mess. Pizza boxes stacked on the coffee table, empty beer cans scattered across the floor. I sighed, feeling the weight of motherhood and housekeeping already pressing down on my shoulders. "In here?" James's gruff voice came from the kitchen. I steeled myself and walked in, hoping to see a hint of the man I'd married. He was slouched at the table, scrolling through his phone. He barely glanced up as I entered. "Oh, you're back." "Yes, we're home," I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "Did you miss us?" James shrugged, his eyes still on his screen. "Sure. How's the kid?" "Ethan," I corrected gently. "His name is Ethan, remember? Would you like to hold him?" Finally, James looked up. His eyes widened, and not in a good way. "Jesus, Alicia, you look different." I felt my cheeks flush. "I just had a baby, James. It takes time for the body to—" Yeah, he waved his hand dismissively. "Just maybe lay off the ice cream for a while." "Huh? You're looking a bit puffy." The words hit me like a slap. I clutched Ethan closer, as if to shield him from his father's callousness. "I can't believe you just said that." James stood up, stretching lazily. "What? I'm just being honest. You asked me if I missed you, and honestly, I missed the old Alicia, the hot one." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I'm still me, James. I'm just adjusting." He snorted, grabbing another beer from the fridge. "Yeah, well, adjust faster. I didn't sign up for a mom bod." The room seemed to spin around me. Was this really happening? Was this the man I'd chosen to father my child? "I'm going to put Ethan down for a nap," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe you could clean up a bit while I'm gone?" James just grunted, already back to his phone. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like a mountain. When I reached the nursery, pristine and untouched since I'd left for the hospital, I finally let the tears fall. "Oh, Ethan," I whispered, gently laying him in his crib. "I'm so sorry. I thought your daddy would be different." As I stood there watching my perfect little boy sleep, a strange feeling began to creep over me. It wasn't just sadness or disappointment. It was something darker, something I'd never felt before. Rage. How dare he? How dare James treat me like this after everything I'd been through? The sleepless nights, the pain, the fear. All to bring his son into the world. And this was how he repaid me? I clenched my fists, a plan already forming in my mind. If James wanted the old Alicia back, he'd get her, but not in the way he expected. "I promise you, Ethan," I whispered fiercely, "Mommy's going to fix this, and Daddy, he's going to regret ever taking us for granted." As if in response, Ethan's tiny hand reached out, grasping my finger. In that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about us, and I would do whatever it took to protect my son from a father who clearly didn't deserve him. The game was on, and James had no idea what was coming. I never thought I'd dread the sound of my own husband coming home, but here I was, tensing up at the jangle of keys in the lock. Ethan squirmed in my arms, sensing my anxiety. "Honey, I'm home," James called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I heard the thud of his briefcase hitting the floor, followed by the familiar hiss of a beer can opening. "In the nursery," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. I just finished changing Ethan and was about to put him down for a nap. Heavy footsteps approached, and James appeared in the doorway, beer in hand. His eyes raked over me, and I felt myself shrink under his gaze. "Still wearing those maternity clothes, huh?" he said, taking a swig. "You know, most women are back in shape by now." I bit my lip, fighting back tears. "James, it's only been 6 weeks. The doctor said," he mimicked. "I'm starting to think you're using that as an excuse. Maybe you just like being fat." The words stung, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. "Can we not do this in front of Ethan?" James rolled his eyes. "He's a baby. He doesn't understand anything." He peered at Ethan, his lip curling slightly. "Though I gotta say, he's not exactly a looker, is he? Must take after your side of the family." Something snapped inside me. "That's enough!" I hissed, careful not to raise my voice too much. He's perfect, and if you can't see that, then maybe you need to take a good, that hard look at yourself. For a moment, James looked taken aback. Then his face hardened. Watch your tone, Alicia. I'm the one bringing home the bacon around here. The least you could do is try to look good for me. I placed Ethan in his crib, my hands shaking with anger. And what exactly have you done to help since we brought him home? Have you changed a single diaper? Gotten up for a night feeding? Hell, have you even picked up after yourself? James' face flushed red. That's woman's work. I didn't become a father to play housemaid. No, I spat. You became a father to criticize and belittle your wife and son. Well done, James. Father of the Year material right here. He took a menacing step towards me, and for a moment, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he drained his beer and tossed the can on the floor. Clean that up, he growled. And while you're at it, maybe think about hitting the gym. I'm not asking for much, just for my wife to look like my wife again. With that, he stormed out, leaving me trembling in his wake. I heard the TV blare to life downstairs, some inane sports commentary filling the house. I sank to the floor, tears finally spilling over. How had it come to this? The man I married, the one who had held my hand through labor and promised to love me forever. Where was he? A soft coo from the crib caught my attention. I looked up to see Ethan watching me, his tiny face a picture of innocence. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I stood up, wiping my eyes. No more, I whispered to Ethan. Mommy's done being a punching bag. I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Mom? I said when she answered. I need your help with something. As I outlined my plan to Barbara, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. James wanted the old Alicia back? Fine. But he'd soon learn that you should be careful what you wish for. Are you sure about this, honey? Mom asked, concern evident in her voice. I looked at Ethan, peacefully drifting off to sleep, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied. It's time for a change. And James? He won't know what hit him. As I hung up, I heard James shouting from downstairs, demanding dinner. I squared my shoulders, a grim smile playing on my lips. Let him yell. His days of calling the shots were numbered. The game was changing, and I was about to become a player he never saw coming. The acrid smell of whiskey hit me before I even opened the front door. My stomach clenched, knowing what awaited me inside. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the storm. James? I called out, stepping into our dimly lit living room. Empty bottles littered the coffee table, and the TV blared some mindless reality show. A grunt from the couch was my only answer. I found James sprawled there, eyes glazed, another half-empty bottle dangling from his fingers. You're home early, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Rough day at work? He snorted, taking another swig. What do you care? Too busy with your precious baby to give a damn about me. I bit back a retort. Engaging him when he was like this never ended well. I'm going to check on Ethan, I said, turning towards the stairs. Oh yeah, run to your little brat, James slurred, his words dripping with venom. God knows he needs all the attention he can get. Might grow up to look halfway decent if you hover enough. I froze, my hand on the banister. What did you just say? James hauled himself up, swaying slightly. You heard me. Kid's as ugly as sin. Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, huh? Something snapped inside me. All the pent-up anger, hurt, and frustration of the past months came rushing to the surface. How dare you? I hissed, advancing on him. How dare you speak about our son that way? He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Our son, please. I'm starting to wonder if he's even mine. Gus, maybe you've been fooling around, huh? Found someone who doesn't mind your fat ass? The slap echoed through the room before I even realized I'd raised my hand. James stumbled back, shock momentarily replacing the drunken haze in his eyes. You bitch, he snarled, rubbing his cheek. You'll pay for that. Fear gripped me as he lunged forward, but years of resentment gave me strength. I sidestepped his clumsy attack, sending him crashing into the coffee table. Enough! I shouted, my voice ringing with an authority I didn't know I possessed. I've had enough of your abuse, James. This ends now. He struggled to his feet, glass crunching under his shoes. You think you can stand up to me? You're nothing without me, Alicia. Nothing. A baby's cry pierced the air, snapping us both out of our rage. I turned and raced up the stairs, heart pounding. Behind me, I heard James stumbling after me, his curses following me like a toxic cloud. I burst into the nursery, scooping Ethan into my arms. "Shh, baby, it's okay," I murmured, even as my own tears threatened to fall. "Mommy's here." James appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of drunken fury. "Put him down," he growled. "This is between us." I clutched Ethan tighter, backing away. "Stay back, James. I mean it." He took a menacing step forward. "Or what? You'll slap me again? Go ahead. Give me a reason." In that moment, looking into the eyes of the man I once loved, now twisted by alcohol and hate, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Ethan, about giving him the life he deserved. "No," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I won't give you anything. Not anymore." I reached for my phone with my free hand, never taking my eyes off James. "I'm calling the police," I told him, "and then I'm leaving. For good." Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or a moment of clarity. But it was quickly swallowed by rage. "You wouldn't dare," he snarled. I met his gaze, unflinching. "Watch me." As I dialed 911, a strange calm settled over me. This was it, the point of no return. But as I held Ethan close, feeling his tiny heart beating against mine, I knew I was making the right choice. The game had changed, and this time I was playing for keeps. The gym locker room echoed with the sound of my labored breathing as I stared at my reflection in the mirror. 3 months had passed since that fateful night when I'd finally stood up to James. Now, here I was, drenched in sweat, my muscles aching, but a fire burning in my eyes that I hadn't seen in years. "You're killing it, Alicia," Sarah, my personal trainer, said as she poked her head into the locker room. "Same time tomorrow?" I nodded, managing a smile. Wouldn't miss it for the world. As Sarah left, I allowed myself a moment of pride. The woman in the mirror was changing, not just physically, but mentally. The soft, pliable Alicia who'd let James walk all over her was fading away, replaced by someone stronger, fiercer. Back home, I found my mother, Barbara, playing with Ethan on the living room floor. She'd been my rock these past months, moving in to help with Ethan while I focused on rebuilding myself. "How was the gym, sweetheart?" she asked, scooping up Ethan as I bent to kiss his forehead. "Brutal," I admitted, "but in a good way. I feel alive." Barbara's eyes crinkled with a mixture of pride and concern. "And James? Any word?" I shook my head. After that night, James had moved out, alternating between begging for forgiveness and hurling threats. But I'd held firm, focusing on myself and Ethan. "His lawyer called again," I said, sinking onto the couch. "They're pushing for joint custody." Barbara's face hardened. "Over my dead body. After what he did." "I know, Mom," I interrupted gently, "but the court doesn't see it that way, without concrete evidence of abuse." The words hung heavy in the air. We both knew what was at stake. If James got joint custody, all my efforts to protect Ethan could be undone. As if sensing the tension, Ethan began to fuss. I took him from Barbara, breathing in his sweet baby scent. "It's okay, little man," I murmured. "Mommy's got you." Later that night, after putting Ethan to bed, I sat at the kitchen table poring over legal documents. The custody battle loomed, a dark cloud on the horizon of my newfound strength. A text message lit up my phone. "James, miss me yet? You can't keep my... Remember when you said to call if I ever wanted to press charges? I'm ready." There was a pause on the other end. "Are you sure about this, Alicia? Once we start, there's no going back." I looked at the baby monitor, watching Ethan's peaceful, sleeping face. Then my eyes drifted to the mirror in the hallway, catching my reflection. The woman staring back at me wasn't a victim anymore. She was a fighter. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "It's time James faced the consequences of his actions, and I'm going to make damn sure he never hurts us again." As I hung up, a mix of fear and determination coursed through me. The path ahead would be hard, but I was ready. James wanted a fight. He was about to get one he'd never see coming. The game had changed, and this time I was playing for keeps. For Ethan. For myself. And for every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. Watch out, James. The new Alicia is coming for you, and she's not holding back. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the woman staring back at me. 6 months of grueling workouts, strict dieting, and sheer determination had transformed my body. The soft, postpartum curves James had so cruelly mocked were replaced by lean muscle and renewed confidence. "Alicia?" Mom called from downstairs. "James is here for his visitation with Ethan." My stomach clenched. Despite the restraining order, the court had granted James supervised visits. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my form-fitting workout clothes. Time to face the music. As I descended the stairs, I heard James's voice, thick with false charm. "There's my big boy, come to Daddy!" I rounded the corner to find James, looking disheveled and slightly bloated, awkwardly holding Ethan. His eyes widened as they landed on me, a flicker of something, shock, desire, crossing his face before he masked it with a sneer. "Well, well," he drawled. "Look who finally decided to take care of herself." I bit back a retort, focusing instead on Ethan. "Hey, sweetie, Mommy's right here if you need me, okay?" James scoffed. "He doesn't need you hovering. Do you, champ?" He bounced Ethan roughly, causing him to whimper. "Careful," I snapped, instinctively reaching for my son. James pulled away, his eyes narrowing. "Back off. It's my time with him." The tension in the room was palpable. Mom stepped in, ever the peacekeeper. "Why don't we all sit down? I've made some snacks." As we moved to the living room, I couldn't help but notice James's labored breathing, the way his shirt strained against his expanding waistline. My secret weapon, weekly deliveries of high-calorie, irresistible treats to his apartment was clearly working. James plopped onto the couch, immediately reaching for the plate of cookies. "At least someone in this house knows how to treat a guest," he mumbled through a mouthful of crumbs. I perched on the edge of an armchair, watching him like a hawk as he interacted with Ethan. Despite his bravado, it was clear he had no idea how to handle a baby. "So," James said, eyeing me over Ethan's head, "you've been busy, huh? Trying to relive your glory days?" I met his gaze steadily. "I've been taking care of myself, something you might want to consider." His face flushed red. "Watch it, Alicia. Don't forget who made you who you are." "Oh, I haven't forgotten," I replied, my voice low and dangerous. "I remember everything." The air crackled with unspoken threats. Ethan, sensing the tension, began to cry. James looked panicked, holding him at arm's length. "Here," I said, standing up. "Let me." "I said back off," James snapped, jerking away. In his haste, he lost his grip on Ethan. Time seemed to slow down. I lunged forward, my heart in my throat, as Ethan slipped from James's grasp. By some miracle, I managed to catch him just before he hit the floor. "Oh my God," Mom gasped, rushing to our side. I clutched Ethan to my chest, my whole body shaking. James stood frozen, his face ashen. "I didn't mean to," he stammered. White-hot rage coursed through me. "Get out," I hissed. "Get out now." "Alicia, please, it was an accident." "An accident," I exploded. "You could have seriously hurt him. This ends now, James. No more visits, no more chances. I'm calling my lawyer, and I'm going for full custody." James's face contorted with fury. "You can't do that. He's my son, too." "A son you just dropped," I shouted back. "Leave, James, before I call the police." For a moment I thought he might lunge at me, but then, deflating like a punctured balloon, he turned and stomped out, slamming the door behind him. As the echo faded, I sank to the floor, still cradling Ethan. Mom knelt beside us, her hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked softly. I looked down at Ethan, his tiny fingers curled around mine, his eyes wide with trust. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about protecting my child, no matter the cost. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "But I will be. We both will be." As I held my son close, a steely resolve settled over me. James had no idea what was coming, but he was about to find out just how far a mother would go to protect her child. "Mommy, do I have to go?" Ethan's small voice quivered as I helped him into his coat. My heart clenched, but I forced a smile. "It's just for the weekend, sweetie. Remember what we talked about? Daddy misses you." 4 years had passed since that fateful day when James nearly dropped Ethan. Despite my best efforts, the court had recently granted James unsupervised weekend visits. The thought of Ethan alone with him made my stomach churn. A car horn blared outside. James, impatient as ever. "Come on, champ!" James called from the driveway, his voice overly cheerful. "We've got a big weekend planned." I walked Ethan out, my grip on his hand perhaps a little too tight. James stood by his car, a far cry from the fit man I'd married. Years of my special deliveries and his own neglect had taken their toll. He was easily 100 pounds heavier, his once chiseled face now puffy and red. "Hey, big guy!" James scooped Ethan up, grunting with the effort. "Ready for some man time?" Ethan nodded hesitantly, looking back at me. I swallowed hard, pushing down the urge to snatch him back. "Be good for Daddy, okay?" I said, kissing his forehead. Then, to James, my voice low and steely, "Remember, he has swimming lessons tomorrow at 10. Don't be late." James rolled his eyes. "Relax, Alicia. I've got this. Maybe if you weren't so busy at that gym of yours, you'd trust me more." I bit back a retort. My job at the fitness club had been a godsend, not just financially, but for my sanity. Plus, it gave me access to resources I needed for the next phase of my plan. As they drove away, I felt a familiar mix of anger and fear bubbling up. I needed to channel it, to stay focused. I headed to the gym, throwing myself into a punishing workout. Hours later, drenched in sweat and pleasantly sore, I checked my phone. No messages from James. I tried not to worry. He wouldn't dare mess this up, not when he was finally getting what he wanted. Sunday afternoon arrived with agonizing slowness. I paced the living room, checking the clock every few minutes. They were late. Very late. Just as I was about to call, I heard a car door slam. I rushed outside to find James struggling to get Ethan out of the car seat. "What happened?" I demanded, taking in Ethan's tear-stained face and James' disheveled appearance. "Nothing," James snapped. "Traffic was bad." But as Ethan ran to me, I noticed something that made my blood run cold, a small angry bruise on his arm. "Ethan," I said, keeping my voice calm, "but how did you get this bruise?" Before he could answer, James cut in. "He fell at the park. Kids, you know. Always getting into scrapes." Ethan looked up at me, his eyes wide and fearful. In that moment, I knew James was lying. "Go inside, sweetie," I said softly. "Grandma's waiting with a surprise." As soon as Ethan was out of earshot, I rounded on James. "What really happened?" James's face darkened. "I told you he fell. Are you calling me a liar?" "Wouldn't be the first time," I shot back. "If I find out you laid a hand on him..." "You'll what?" James sneered, stepping closer. "Face it, Alicia, you've got nothing on me. The court sees what I want them to see, a loving father who deserves time with his son." For a moment I saw red. All the pain, all the humiliation he'd put me through over the years came rushing back. But then something shifted. A calm, cold determination settled over me. "You're right, James," I said, my voice steady. "The court sees what you want them to see. For now." His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled, a predator's smile. "You'll find out soon enough. Enjoy your visitations while you can." As I turned to go inside, James called out, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "You can't take him from me, Alicia. He's my son, too." I paused at the door, looking back at the pathetic, bloated shell of the man I once loved. "Watch me," I said softly, and closed the door on his stunned face. Inside, I hugged Ethan close, my mind racing. The final phase of my plan was set. James had no idea what was coming, but he was about to learn a very painful lesson. The game was almost over, and I was holding all the cards. The quaint bell above the cafe door chimed as I stepped inside, my heart pounding beneath my carefully chosen outfit. James's parents, John and Kathy, looked up from behind the counter, their smiles faltering as they took in my transformed appearance. "Alicia," Kathy gasped, "is that really you?" I smiled, a predator's grin. "In the flesh. Thanks for agreeing to this little family gathering." John's eyes narrowed. "James said you had something important to discuss. He's on his way." As if on cue, the bell chimed again. James lumbered in, his face flushed from the short walk from the parking lot. He froze when he saw me, his jaw dropping comically. "What the hell is this?" he sputtered. I turned to face him, relishing the shock in his eyes. "Hello, James. So glad you could join us." Kathy, ever the peacemaker, gestured to a table. "Why don't we all sit down? I've prepared some refreshments." As we settled in, the tension was palpable. James couldn't take his eyes off me, a mix of desire and anger clouding his features. His parents exchanged worried glances. "Where's Ethan?" James demanded. "Safe with my mother," I replied coolly. "This conversation isn't for children's ears." John leaned forward. "Alicia, what's going on? You said this was urgent." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "It is. I'm here to talk about James, about the kind of man your son really is." James's face darkened. "Watch it, Alicia," he growled, but I was done being silenced. "For years," I continued, my voice steady, "James has been emotionally and verbally abusive. He's belittled me, mocked my appearance after giving birth to his child, and neglected his duties as a father." Kathy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. John's brow furrowed in disbelief. That's ridiculous, James scoffed. Don't listen to her. She's clearly lost her mind. I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over the play button. Would you like to hear it for yourself? The color drained from James's face as I played the recordings. His cruel words, his drunken rants, the sound of objects being thrown, all preserved in damning clarity. My God, John whispered, his face ashen. Kathy reached for James's hand. Sweetheart, is this true? James jerked away, his eyes wild. She set me up. She's been planning this all along. I met his gaze, unflinching. You're right, James. I have been planning to free myself and our son from your toxicity. I turned to his parents, my voice softening. There's more. Last weekend, Ethan came home with bruises. James claims he fell, but... You bitch. James roared, lunging across the table. His meaty hands closed around my throat, knocking us both to the ground. For a moment, panic seized me. Then years of training kicked in. I brought my knee up sharply, connecting with his soft underbelly. As he wheezed, I twisted, breaking his grip and pinning him to the floor. That's enough! John's voice boomed as he and Kathy pulled us apart. I stood, straightening my clothes, my composure intact. James sprawled on the floor, red-faced and panting. I'm pressing charges, I said calmly, for assault and for what he did to Ethan. I have photographs, medical reports, everything. Kathy sobbed quietly, while John looked at his son with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. James, he said, his voice heavy, is this who you've become? James struggled to his feet, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. You can't do this, he wheezed. I'll lose everything. I met his gaze, years of pain and anger crystallizing into cold determination. You should have thought of that before you laid a hand on our son. As James crumpled, the fight finally leaving him, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle wasn't over. There would be court dates, custody hearings, and no doubt more of James's desperate attempts to maintain control. But standing there, surrounded by the wreckage of the life I'd once known, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The old Alicia was gone. In her place stood a warrior, a protector, a survivor, and God help anyone who tried to stand in my way. The courtroom fell silent as I approached the stand, my heels clicking against the polished floor. James sat at the defendant's table, a shadow of his former self, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw a flicker of the old arrogance there, quickly replaced by fear. Mrs. Henderson, the judge said, you may begin your testimony. I took a deep breath, my hand resting on the thick folder of evidence I'd compiled over the years. Your Honor, I'm here today not just as James Henderson's soon-to-be ex-wife, but as a survivor of years of emotional and physical abuse. For the next hour, I laid bare the ugly truth of my marriage, the cruel taunts about my postpartum body, the neglect of our son, the escalating aggression that culminated in Ethan's bruises. With each revelation, I felt lighter, as if shedding the weight of secrets I'd carried for too long. James's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, a scorned woman out for revenge. But the evidence spoke for itself, the recordings, the photographs, the medical reports. Even James's parents, sitting stiffly in the gallery, couldn't meet my eyes. As I finished my testimony, the judge leaned forward. Mrs. Henderson, given everything you've endured, what do you hope to achieve here today? I straightened my shoulders, my voice steady. Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice and for protection. I want full custody of my son, and I want James to get the help he clearly needs. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. James's face contorted with rage, but a warning look from his lawyer silenced him. The judge nodded thoughtfully. And the divorce papers you've submitted? I allowed myself a small smile. Those are long overdue, Your Honor. As I returned to my seat, I caught sight of my mother in the audience, tears streaming down her face. She mouthed, I'm so proud of you, and I felt a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support. The rest of the proceedings passed in a blur. When the judge finally delivered her verdict granting me full custody and approving the divorce, I felt a curious mix of elation and exhaustion. James, his face ashen, was led away in handcuffs to await sentencing for child endangerment. As he passed me, he leaned in and hissed, This isn't over, Alicia. I met his gaze calmly. Yes, James, it is. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by a flurry of reporters, I spotted John and Kathy hovering uncertainly at the edge of the crowd. I made my way over to them, my heart heavy but resolute. Alicia, Kathy began, her voice trembling. We had no idea, all those years. John cut in, his face lined with shame. We failed you, and we failed our grandson. Can you ever forgive us? I took a deep breath, considering my words carefully. It's not about forgiveness right now. It's about moving forward. Ethan will need his grandparents in his life. If you're willing to be there for him, really be there, then we can work on rebuilding. They nodded eagerly, tears in their eyes. As they walked away, I felt a chapter of my life closing. My mother appeared at my side, wrapping an arm around me. Ready to go home, sweetheart? Home. The word held new meaning now. Not a battleground, not a prison, but a sanctuary for me and my son. More than ready, I replied, smiling. As we drove away, leaving the courthouse and the remnants of my old life behind, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Single motherhood, healing from trauma, rebuilding my life. But for the first time in years, I was excited for the future. The woman who had entered that courtroom was not the same one leaving it. I was stronger now, wiser, unbreakable. James had tried to diminish me, to break my spirit, but in the end, he'd only fueled my transformation. I thought of Ethan waiting for me at home and smiled. We had a whole new life ahead of us, full of love, laughter, and endless possibilities. The game was over, and this time we had both won.